Good morning. Good morning. Got to make sure it's working. Dissatisfied. Dissatisfied. If I had to pick one word to describe the nation of Israel as they journey from slavery to freedom, it would be dissatisfied. Have you ever listened to their stories and wondered, what does God have to do to gain their trust, right? When things get tough, they seem to grumble, they seem to moan about their situation, right? We know God is the God of the universe. They kind of see the big things, right? But they forget that God is also the God of small things, right? He can provide for their basic needs, water, food, that sort of thing. You know the story of Exodus, right? The many miracles that God performed, that they might be delivered from Egypt in the form of the miracles of the plagues. And Pharaoh, at least temporarily, let them go. And then, of course, he changes his mind and he pursues them. And they find themselves between a rock and a hard place, so to speak. They're against the Red Sea, and Pharaoh's hot on their heels. And, of course, he performs a mighty work, right? And he parts the Red Sea, and they cross over, and they're safe on the other side, on the other bank. And then, as Pharaoh pursues in the Red Sea, the waters relent, and they're literally stopped in their tracks. He destroys them, right? And if you read Exodus, you'll see that there's much jubilation on the other side. The women are dancing and they're singing these songs of praise, and they're basically pledging their allegiance to this God who has done many, many mighty works for them. And then just shortly after, they march 3 days into the desert and they're thirsty. And the water they come upon is bitter. It's sour water. And they start to murmur. They start to grumble. Here they just came across the Red Sea. They kind of have short memories, don't they? Moses takes the tree and he throws it in the water and it becomes sweet. And you know the story, as they traveled through the desert, they were hungry, right? And they started to murmur and grumble and wonder, man, why can't we go back to Egypt in slavery? Why can't we go back there? At least we had more food to eat. Of course, God provides them manna in the form of bread and quail in the evening, in the morning and evening. He feeds them every day for 40 years, a prefigurement to our Eucharist now. And then today we see that they're grumbling so bad, Moses is fearful for his life, right? It must have been pretty bad, not just a person or two. It must have been like a beehive, like a low roar, right? And Moses feels like he's going to get stoned. Of course, he intercedes, and God can provide the small things too, right? He gives them water. You know, it sounds like I'm kind of hard on the Jewish people, but if I'm honest with myself, sometimes I grumble too. Sometimes when things get tough, I start to get dissatisfied with my life. I start to question where God has me on the path of my life. Maybe you've been the same. You know, I don't think we have to look very far around us to see that there is an epidemic of people that are dissatisfied, especially in our own country, right? Despite the many blessings that we have. You know, I believe it's because we continue to push God further and further out of our lives. We really do. Out of our families, out of our media, out of our schools. And you know what we're trying to put here in our hearts? Everything but God. And how's that working out for us? Not so good, is it? I've recently been listening to this Catholic program. It's like a extended retreat. It's called the Rescue Project. It's beautiful. And they call out some statistics in the United States, I think, bear light on what I'm saying. The first is that we are 5% of the world population. 5%. We are 80% of the opioid users in the world. 80%. We're literally numbing ourselves to death, aren't we? For 13 straight years, suicide has been on the uptick. I know many of us have been touched by that, and I pray that God give you that healing salve in your heart. It's such a hard thing. And one that really, really hits me in the heart hard is between the ages of 10 and 14, suicide is the second leading cause of death. Something is drastically wrong, isn't it? Something is really, really wrong. In early 2019, a reporter for the Detroit Free Press wrote an article, early 2019, and that article was Why is living shorter and dying sooner a trend? He wrote this article. You see, 2018 marked the third year in a row that life expectancy went down in the United States, despite our medical advances and technology. And the reason this is significant is because it hadn't happened in 100 years. 100 years. 1918 was the last time we had 3 years consecutive that the death rate, our life expectancy went down. And what was happening in 2018? World War I, coming out of World War I, Spanish flu, 50 million people died. In 2018, pre-COVID, COVID had nothing to do with this. Doctors, scientists are scratching their head. They're going, what's going on? Sociologists have been studying this, and what the best they can figure, they're calling it deaths of despair. People are so dissatisfied with their lives, they're losing hope, and they're in a state of desperation. But what is the answer? What is the answer? Have you ever thought to yourself, I know I have, if I just get this thing or that thing, I'll be happy. Maybe it is a promotion at work, a raise. Maybe it's a house or a new car to get you to and from work. Or maybe it's a relationship. Maybe you marry the love of your life. And make no mistake, all of these things are good. They're beautiful, right? But have you ever got those things and then once you had them, you still felt a little empty? You felt a little dissatisfied with your life. You're kind of scratching your head, wondering what's going on. David Duval, I don't know if you know him, I'm not a big golfer, but David Duval was the #1 golfer in the world before Tiger Woods. And he won the British Open, and he was asked a very simple question, very, very simple question. They said, now that you've accomplished this goal, this lifelong goal, are you happy? Are you fulfilled? He wasn't. It sent him into a great depression and a great spiral downward because he realized even though he had the thing that he thought he wanted, he was still empty. He was still empty. But what's the answer? Well, if you're sitting there and you're thinking God's the answer, well, that's the short answer. Absolutely, God definitely is the answer. But more practically, I think we have to change the way we think about our lives radically and how our lives relate to our Lord. Let's go on a journey and let's look at the gospel reading, this very familiar gospel reading, and see if we can find some more answers. Of course, the Samaritan woman, you heard the long gospel, right? She had 5 husbands. Do you think she was a little dissatisfied? Probably. She was dissatisfied. And the fact that she was at the well in the middle of the day tells us something also. In the desert, when do you go to the well? In the morning, in the evening, when it's cool. You don't go in the middle of the day at noon. It's too hot. But Jesus knew this, and Jesus was there waiting on her, wasn't he? He wanted to have an encounter with this lady. Of course, he asks her for something physical. A drink, give me a drink. And she says, what are you talking about? Why are you even talking to me? You see, Jews and Samaritans didn't get along very well, did they? And then for a Jewish man to talk to a woman in public, would somebody other than his family wouldn't have been a thing. So she's saying, how are you, a Jewish man, talking to me? She was taken back, right? And then what does Jesus do? He takes it from the mere physical act of drinking and he brings it into the spiritual, and he talks about living water. Well, who is the living water? Not what, but who is the living water? Well, it is Christ himself, right? And of course, she jumps on this because to a Jew or a Samaritan, living water meant clear water. They knew what that meant. They would use it for rituals. They would use it for cleansing themselves, maybe before marriage. You see, their well water wasn't like our tap water. It probably was a little cloudy. So she wanted this water, and she said, give it to me. And what did she say? Practically, I don't have to come back to this well anymore. I don't have to experience this pain that every time I come up here, people are judging me. And of course, Jesus takes her a little deeper. He reveals something about her life, right? That she had 5 husbands, and her husband that she was with was not her husband. And the light starts to come on where Jesus has taken her. And she says, yeah, this is true. This is true. And then they talk about salvation coming from the Jews. And she starts talking about this guy named the Messiah. And Jesus reveals he is the one. And I think we have a little detail. Sometimes it's in the details where we find some things. Well, she left her jar. She must have took off pretty quick, right? Like she just took off. Her faith really rose pretty quickly. She was excited. She's thinking, wow, this man is telling me about myself. And of course she goes and she spreads the good news despite her reputation, despite how she feels. She's telling everybody, you need to listen to me. And then we see the other line in the story. The disciples come back, and instead of asking Jesus, Jesus, what are you doing? Why are you talking to this woman? It would have been odd for them too, right? They don't. They go merely to the physical. They go to the physical and they say, Rabbi, you need to eat. And Jesus uses this as a moment of teaching, spiritual teaching. He says this, meanwhile, the disciples urged him, Rabbi, eat. But he said to them, I have food to eat of which you do not know. So the disciples said to one another, could someone have brought him something to eat? Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of the one who sent me and to finish his work. My food is to do the will of the one who sent me and to finish his work. Twice in the Gospel of John, we see this idea of being totally filled, not a little filled, but totally filled, first by the living waters, right? Christ himself. And then we see Christ himself is filled by doing the work of the Father, right? His mission. You think he's on to something here, maybe? God's on to something? Well, how do we do this in our lives? How do we practically take this message and live it? Well, I believe it's what many theologians call the sacrament of the moment. The sacrament of the moment. Let me explain. Sacrament moment says that God uses all things in your life. He uses your relationships. He uses your work. He can even use your hobbies. He can use fishing to get to you, to teach us. He instructs us to teach us how to love and to be loved. Over the past couple of days, I've had a little bit of a meditation on this, and I want to share it. I think it'll help you understand what I'm talking about. So we know a sacramental is something set aside for worship, right? Whether it's a rosary, whether it's a statue, a crucifix, right? These things are precious to us, right? We have them blessed, and they help raise our hearts and minds to worship the Lord. Now, if you were to accidentally break your rosary, like really bad, where you couldn't get it back together, you wouldn't just chunk it out into the garbage, would you? You wouldn't throw it out on the street. You'd probably dispose of it properly. Maybe bury it in your garden out front because it's precious to you. Well, dear family, I have news for you. You're more precious than a rosary, a statue, and you have been blessed. You have been baptized. The Holy Spirit resides in each and every one of you. Paul tells us this. He says that we're to pray unceasingly. How do we pray unceasingly? Well, when we live the sacrament of the moment, we become living sacramentals to others. We become a blessing to others. You are a living sacramental. Christ tells us that we will do greater things than him. How do we do greater things than God? It just doesn't seem possible. He parted the Red Sea. He made the universe. Well, guess what? You are his hands and feet. God resides in you. And when you spread that love, right, you become a living sacramental. So as we rapidly, and I mean rapidly, it seems like we're approaching Easter, and we're doing our prayer, our almsgiving, and our charitable works, I'd like for you to think of this idea of the sacrament of the moment in your life and bring God into all those places and all of those spaces that maybe you've been reluctant to do, and be that living sacramental for others. Be a blessing for others. May God bless you.
As the word of God has been proclaimed for us